welcome. Let's get excited. Let's get excited. You know, I was just telling my special guest just before we went live. I'm a little bit out of breath. Brother was out there jumping on a trampoline all day. This afternoon, I was on a field trip with my little girl, and that was fun. I realized I can still dunk a little bit. You know, now when I say dunk, I'm talking about assisted with a trampoline. The way it goes, I can still get up there. You know what I'm saying? Brother can still bounce, still got bunnies, if you will. Anyway, welcome back to the Leading Equity. Oh no, this is not the Leading Equity podcast. Oh my gosh, this is the wrong show. This is the Art of Advocacy. Okay, let me say this correctly. All right, welcome to the Art of Advocacy live stream. Welcome. I'm Dr. Sheldon L. Akins, host of the Leading Equity podcast, and also the founder of the Leading Equity Center. By the way, I always got to remind you, if you have not picked up this copy yet, Leading Equity, Becoming an Advocate for All Students, jump on and pre-order that right now. Now, I am offering a special thing now. If you're signed up for my newsletter, you know that if you show proof of your receipt for purchasing the pre-order, which it should arrive to your house. If you're doing Amazon, it'll get there. I think they said July 20th, but it'll be sometime in July if you ordered it. But if you do, you can sign up. You'll get signed up for the book study. So I'm doing a book study as well. I'm thinking about doing a launch party also. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm thinking about it. It's a thought. Okay, we'll see how that goes. If you're out there, say hello. I see Elizabeth Polo is here. Welcome. Can't wait to get the book. I can't wait to get it to you. It's a really good book. And I'm not just saying that, but I really legit feel like this is a good book. I put my heart and soul into this thing. So if you haven't grabbed it already, make sure you do so. And Elizabeth, I don't know if I have you signed up already for the book study, but if you're interested in getting set up for that, just shoot me an email when you get a chance, sheldon@leadingequitycenter.com. Okay, Elizabeth says she is down. So shoot me an email if you can when you get a chance. sheldon@leadingequitycenter.com, just with a screenshot or something of your receipt, and I'll get you signed up for the book study. Oh my gosh, why am I stumbling with my words today? So today we have a very special guest, and we're going to be talking about words, and we'll see where the conversation goes. I like to do these live streams because I might have an idea as far as where I want to go with things, but we'll just kind of see where it goes. I see Beth is here. Thank you, Beth, by the way. Yes, just ordered the book too. Thank you so much, Beth. I appreciate you for that. And we'll get you signed up for, I'm going to take a note real quick because I don't want to forget, but I'll definitely get Elizabeth and Beth. I'll get both of y'all signed up for the book study. Anybody else that wants to get a book pre-ordered, you can get signed up for the book study as well. Okay. So I appreciate your support. Now, my special guest is someone who has been with me for almost 4 years, from almost the inception of the podcast. She was one of my very first students when I first launched a course for the Leading Equity Center, teaching through a culturally diverse lens, the first online course, which by the way is available online on my website, leadingequitycenter.com. But she was there and we've connected early on then. And I'm really excited because now if you are a person that reads the newsletter, The Weekend Voice, Popsy is very, very, very behind the scenes working on that each week and make sure that she has notes and articles, the research, the writing, all that. I got to give credit to Popsy for that outstanding work that she has been doing on helping out the Leading Equity Center in that capacity. She does some amazing work. She has journalism background, and I'll obviously give her an opportunity to share a little bit more about herself. But I'll read a quick sentence or two about her bio, and then we'll bring her on and we'll get going. Popsy Kanagaratnam, a doctoral candidate in education at the George Washington University, is passionate about learning and education. She is a content creator for the Leading Equity Center and an educational consultant. So, without further ado, bring it on, Popsy. Popsy, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And hi to Elizabeth and Beth. and I'm looking forward to meeting Beth this summer
Oh
since we're
yeah.
both in Maryland. Oh, yeah. So go Maryland.
Go Maryland. Representing the East Coast DMV area. That's what's up. Popsy, again, I appreciate the work that you do with the Leading Equity Center, and I'm so glad that we're able to connect live. You and I don't get to talk a lot. And we were just talking before we went live that we've actually never met each other in person. For as much time as we spend together virtually via emails and Zoom calls and all that stuff, we've never actually seen each other face to face. Isn't that crazy?
It is. And I'm looking forward to one of these days you'll get to this area.
One day, one day, one day. So I briefly shared your bio, but I'd love for you to expand upon that. So could you share a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, currently I am obviously working with the Leading Equity Center and writing, which I love. And I'm also finishing up my doctoral dissertation at GW. And once I finish, I'll be transitioning into educational consulting. So those are the three things.
Great, great. Well, again, you do some amazing work, so I'm happy for you. And you're almost done. You say you're shooting for about the fall of this year to finish it, early fall.
Two
Good
more
for you.
chapters to go. Two more.
Two more chapters. Two more chapters. Well, I do not miss those days. I tell you what. So I want to get into, okay, you say you want to be an education consultant. That's the goal. That is where you're at. And primarily, I know you're very interested in equity work. I'd love to hear a little bit of your backstory as far as what brought you to wanting to do this work.
Absolutely. But before we start, I just want to take a brief moment to acknowledge the fact that we had approximately 200 mass shootings this year and 65 last weekend.
65 last weekend?
65 shootings, 17 deaths.
Mass shootings?
There was a grocery store one in Buffalo.
Right.
There was one in a park in Illinois, in Chicago, where 3 people were shot and 1 died. There was a church in California, 5 were shot and 1 died. A flea market in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. 1 in Texas, 5 people were shot and 1 died. A flea market in Houston, and there were 3 incidents in Milwaukee.
All last week?
All last weekend, yes.
Boy. Thank you so I'm sorry, I cut you off. You were in the middle of something.
No, it's sort of the sobering reality. It also affects students in classrooms because it could be a family member, a neighbor, a friend, and communities are small. I agree, Beth. Something has got to change.
Yeah, definitely. And they say, I know you gave those stats as far as the murders and shootings and things, but I mean, I know for sure, what happened in Buffalo. I mean, that was a racially motivated shooting. People were targeted for that. I wonder how many of those other shootings that you listed there were also racially based.
I don't know. I know I read a little bit about the one in California, and it was a group of Taiwanese people who were at a church. And apparently it was another person who was also from Taiwan and had some issues, but his roommate is apparently someone who is racist. So there's a lot of unknowns, and until we know, we don't.
Well, first of all, and thank you for acknowledging that, and we definitely want to bring. I hate to all. Here's the thing, the thing about when I heard about Buffalo, and it wasn't just Buffalo, it was it was a salon, an Asian salon that got shot up in Georgia, I believe, that got shot up as well. And all of these things happen. And it just gets you sick in your stomach. And it's just like, when is this going to end? At what point? And then you hear all these talks about critical race theory and, don't talk about this, don't talk about that. But this stuff impacts our students and it impacts their families and our communities. And then we're telling them we can't talk about this and just pretend like nothing has happened and just teach the lesson. It just doesn't make any sense to me, and it's disheartening sometimes and very frustrating that we're still dealing with these type of things.
I agree completely. And so backtracking a bit, you asked me how I got into this work, and a
Yes.
lot
Oh
of it,
yeah, that was the original question.
that was the original question. So coming from Singapore, I had never been exposed to the American public school system until I became a teacher. And one of the first things that struck me was the language that teachers use in the teacher's lounge, in the break room, when you hear a teacher saying, well, you're not going to get very far with that kid, or he's really low, or that family is low.
Mhm.
And I wondered because with enough focused attention, I saw every single student with whom I worked show improvement. But I also realized that a student who had been low in second grade and then was able to turn things around when they were in fifth grade, their second grade teacher was still saying, well, she shouldn't have been in the school anyway.
Mm.
And you kind of wonder what impact does do our words, does our language have on the individual students? And it's sort of building on something that Desmond Williams said last week about how if we don't center the students, by the time they get to middle school, we've lost them.
Yeah. And that's big right there. And
Huge.
and
Mhm.
sometimes we don't realize how those words that we say and the language that we utilize can definitely negatively impact our students. So tell me more. Tell me. So that was kind of the beginning pieces. What else happened?
Um, well, there were a couple of instances where I'd had a kid in fourth grade, and in fifth grade, after lunch, almost every single day, I'd see him going to the office. And I'd say, so why are you going to the office? And he kind of roll his eyes and say, they said I was being disrespectful. And one day I was in the classroom first thing in the morning, and the teacher made some kind of flip comment. It was a joke. And another kid, an Asian kid, responded and she laughed. And then this kid responded and she looked at him and said, don't be disrespectful. And he said almost exactly the same thing.
Mm.
And I thought that was weird. And I didn't know enough and I didn't have the language then to challenge her on it. But I started seeing similar incidents. And when I did challenge the teachers on something like that, the response was, well, don't you think she was disrespectful? I'll prove it to me that she wasn't. And it's like, wow. And so at that point, I started wondering exactly what was going on and what we were doing because it certainly wasn't in the best interest of the students.
So so the teacher basically was being defensive. So you called her out,
Yeah.
and so she started getting defensive. I mean, was she not willing to listen to you at all and what you had to say?
She wasn't. She wanted to justify her behavior.
Hmm. Well, it's the kid's fault. The kid was being
Yeah.
disrespectful.
Right.
I didn't do anything. I didn't say anything
Yeah.
to trigger that child to
Mhm.
respond the way that they responded. It was all the kid.
But also, this was the second kid who had a similar response. And the first
Mhm.
kid got away with it, and the second kid didn't.
Exactly. So what did you perceive that to be? I mean, okay, let me ask you this. So when you brought this to her attention, how did you come about it? Like what was kind of the how the dialogue went?
It was one of those, I think it was, in the hallway or something, and I said, "Oh, I have a question. Earlier today when this happened, your response was, and I'm just curious because so and so said practically the same thing, and it was just immediate, well, the second kid was disrespectful, and he's always disrespectful." And it's like, "Whoa."
Mm, he's always disrespectful.
Yeah, always.
So this child has been labeled,
Mhm.
right? And so at this point, doesn't matter what they do or say, they're
Right.
going to always have that issue.
And the question is, how do you reframe it? How do you change the thinking?
Hmm.
Especially when it's a teacher who's been there for, a number of years and has a lot years of experience, and it's the judgments that were concerning.
So with the work that you want, so what if you equity is such a broad term,
It
right?
is.
It covers so many different places. Is that kind of the niche for you as far as like kind of helping folks develop some of the language, some of the responses to make? I mean, where would you primarily want to focus when it comes to doing equity work?
That's a part of it. I'd also want to look at the structures
Hmm.
because you and I have talked about how with the pandemic, it was an opportunity for a reset, and that didn't happen.
Yeah.
We went right back into schools. Some schools had testing in the first week or the second week. And the language I kept hearing was the kids are behind.
Hmm.
And then I kept hearing that the black and brown kids are behind.
Hmm.
And the question is, behind what? Because if you put it in context, 100 million people have died, right? Is it a million? It's a million. A million people have died,
At least, yeah.
at least a million, and more worldwide. But if you look just here, those are neighbors, friends, relatives, and some people have lost jobs. Some businesses have gone under. People have had to move. How does a child function with all of that in the background that's not acknowledged within schools? And how does a child excel when we don't talk about it? We're just pretending that everything is the way it was in 2015 or 2016 or something, and it's not.
Yeah.
We're not the same. The kids are not the same.
I really thought that I mean, like you said, we talked about it, but I really thought that when COVID first hit and I was watching stuff and people were scrambling, educators, principals especially, were trying to figure out what to do. Are we opening up? Are we going to be closed? What does CDC say? And I was like, man, it would be such a great opportunity for us to really start looking at our systems and like the way we're grading. Like I was hoping grading would change and standardized testing would change. But no, what happened? A year or so of hodgepodge education goes by, and we're kind of back to the groove of the quote unquote traditional style of education. It's still prevalent these days. So I mean, if you were to go into a school, what would be some ways that you would like want to change, or like would you do audit process? What will kind of be your strategy to kind of get going as far as looking at the systems as well?
The first step would be talking to administrations,
Mhm.
finding out what their priorities are and where they are, and then talking to staff and not just teachers, but also aides and also pretty much everyone in the building as many in the building as I could get to within a reasonable time, because there are things that the custodians, the building service workers see. There are things that the cafeteria people see. There are things that the media specialists and the art and music teachers see that
Mhm.
classroom teachers don't see. And we need to get everyone's input in order to be successful.
Yeah.
Then we need to center the students. We have got to center the students and not the teachers and not the tests. And then the next part of it is getting input from some of the students. And it'd be a lot to get all of them, but if you had a sample from each grade and they could speak freely, kids notice things, they know things,
Hmm. Yeah, they do.
but it would have to be a school by school or district by district. It would have to be something that you start with one middle school, one high school, and one elementary school in a district, and then maybe add a second one and
Yeah.
see how that works.
I also like what let's see Elizabeth's comment here. She says, I think it's important to start by having professionals assess their own perspective as first. What are your thoughts on that, Popsy?
Absolutely, because they're the best ones to know. And hearing what they say and hearing their language and how they phrase it can be really informative.
Hmm. So let me ask you this. All right. So one of the things we've established that words matter. We've established that systems need to change, and that's kind of one of the reasons why you've got you and I'm glad you shared your background information as far as why you want to do, or you're planning to do the equity work. But when we think about words, I want to go back to that for a moment and how much they matter. there's one side of it from, okay, these are the things that as I'm an educator or I'm a staff member or somebody at a school, and I'm saying, making these comments, slight, just little subtle comments about students and things like that. But then on a grander scale, when we're thinking about especially folks that are non-educators that are bringing in culture, not culture responsive. I should not.
Critical race theory.
Let me not mix that up. Critical race theory, and what SEL is under fire these days, and other words that are out there. Alphabet soup. What are some of your thoughts in regards to that?
The best demonstration of the alphabet soup is actually doing it. And I did a study once with fourth graders, and I had a couple of groups of 6 to 8 fourth graders. And Friday mornings, we just sat in a circle, and they told me about one issue that they had. And the group decided whether that was the real issue or whether they had to dig deeper. The group asked questions. The group suggested a solution. And within a week or so, they came back and reported, and they wrote a reflection. And then they talked about whether they had tried the group solution and how it worked. And within the fall semester, every single one of those students who participated in that group saw that grades go up, their confidence levels go up. They started walking differently. They started participating more in class. They were more engaged. And having seen results like that, whatever you call it, SEL works.
Say that one, like what that last sentence you said, whatever you call it. Say it one more time.
Sometimes, depending on the situation, if someone is triggered by hearing the words SEL, you can just say, it's a conversation group or it's some other group, and still use SEL techniques, because having them write reflections. And one of them said to me at the end of the semester, I used to hate to write and I didn't know what to say, but then after a while, it became much easier. And that translated into their English class. And one of my students felt very insecure about math, but then after a while, he's like, I think I can do this. I don't think I need to ask for help anymore. And so putting it into practice and demonstrating how effective it can be is the best way to convince someone. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Yes. So that's has been my thoughts for the last, I would say, over the last year or so. It's like semantics to me. It's just like, can we agree that, like you said, if I'm working with a student and maybe they don't have the confidence at the moment, and then when you help them work through that, you help them work in groups and cooperative learning, and you help them have develop their empathy towards others. These are simple things that we teach our students, especially at the lower levels, elementary, early childhood. We teach them these basic skills. But then, if we dare say social emotional learning, boom, it's an issue. But if we didn't call it that, if we didn't mention those words or those 3 letters, it wouldn't have been a problem. But as soon as you say something like that, it's an issue. I always say, we talk about equity and we think about teaching instruction, for example, and we talk about differentiated instruction. What is that? So I recognize certain students need some certain things here and there. Maybe it's an IEP here. Maybe there's something else learning. That's equity.
Exactly.
But when we say differentiated instruction, that's fine. But if you call it equity, oh my gosh, you're taking away from someone. And it's again, are we really spending all this time worried about words? Is that a form of distraction? Are the I guess the conservative side of people, or are they is this just a distraction? I mean, what are your thoughts? Why are these words, these acronyms, all these different things such a big issue?
Basically, a lot of people who haven't been in classrooms remember that when they were young, certain things didn't exist. And to me, it's very much like people who said, well, I had a tough time doing this and that. and therefore everyone else should go through the exact same path that I did.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, and that's an issue. You know, we have to keep in mind our original educational system goes all the way back to the Industrial Revolution, right? And we also had to keep in mind who that educational system was built for. It wasn't built for people like you and people like myself. And so as a
Boys,
result, we want to keep it the same.
boys, young men who were going into the priesthood, people who had the time and money to spend on an education.
Yeah. Yeah, the elitists often, and I have a whole training that I do on decolonizing the classroom, and I talk about that. You know, I talk about, you know, education was built top down, um, age based, and we still see that stuff today. We that still is a thing. The way it's built, and it's not student centered. And
Exactly.
I would love for us to shift to a more student centered approach when it comes to learning and it comes to education. Why can't we learn from our students? There's so much. But again, and I love this comment that Beth put in here. She talks about the whole child,
Hmm.
right? We
Yeah,
sometimes we stick so much on you know, you need to learn this formula, you need to learn this algorithm, whatever, you need to learn this historical event, and we forget that we got human beings in our classroom that have issues that are dealing with a pandemic right now, whose
exactly.
parents are also and guardians are also dealing with a pandemic, and how that family structure has probably had some sort of you know, all kind of experiences that we don't know about, but we expect them to show up to class every day and pass our tests, our quizzes, our assessments, as if nothing else is happening in life.
Yeah.
There's killings happening. Well, you just gave some stats. I dare forget about that. We have stuff that happens in our world, not just at home, but also globally, that's happening in our nation, that's happening in their communities. And we forget, or not we, but a lot of people forget they're human beings. And how you
And
respond and respond to that is can be difficult. As adults can be
there's a
difficult.
shortage of formula. There's a war in Ukraine. People may have family members. There's just so much going on.
Mm-hmm.
And before we leave the topic, though, my students who are in my little group for SEL, which we won't call SEL, at the end of the year wanted to know, in the spring, wanted to know if they could have a little thank you tea for all of the adults in the building who had helped them. And
Mm-hmm.
they organized the whole thing themselves, made little invitations, created a list. They wanted lemonade and cookies and um, had balloons and wrote thank you notes. And then the day of, two of them came to me and said, "We'd like to play a piece of music. We've been practicing." And they only knew two tunes from their music class. And they said, "But we need to borrow some stands. And there are six of us. So if so and so comes with me and the two of us go and ask the music teacher if we can borrow stands, we'll be fine." And I thought they had identified a need, they had found out a solution. All they needed was permission to do it. And I was like, go. And when you
Mm-hmm.
think of fourth graders, how often do they thank, the cafeteria manager said she had never been thanked in all of her years. And she was really emotional. And some of the building service workers were thrilled.
Good. And just those little things. A lot of our, you know, we had Teacher Appreciation Week not too long ago, and there's an Administrators Day. But is I don't know. I know there's an admin assistance day, but is there a staff day? Like, is that a thing that we celebrate at our schools for those who are not, you know, in the classrooms, or those who aren't leading schools, but just like you said, our bus drivers, our paraprofessionals, maybe support staff that are out there as well. I mean, it's really nice for them to be appreciated also. Maybe I missed it, but do you know, are there some appreciation time?
I think we did, but again, it was not to the same scale
Mhm.
as teacher appreciation and the others.
Yeah. I think Mona has a good point here. Thank you, Mona, for joining us, by the way. I like ASCD's whole child, whole person, whole school, whole community approach. It puts human at the center, not just students. The great resignation reminds us that the adults need their basic needs, human needs supported as well. as students. Yeah, and thank you for saying that.
Absolutely. And the Great Resignation made me
Mhm.
think, because last week, maybe, or the week before, um, Education Week published the results of a teacher satisfaction survey, and 12% of the teachers were satisfied.
12%.
12%.
Oh, we got a ways to go, don't we?
Just a small ways.
This is,
And the NEA did something in February, and they said 55% of teachers were thinking about leaving the classroom.
55% were thinking about leaving the
Uh-huh.
classroom.
Yeah.
That sounds about right, to be honest. Like, actually, I thought it would be higher these days.
And the Bureau of Labor Statistics said in January 2020, we had 10.6 million teachers in the US. And in January 2022, we had 10 million. So we've lost 600,000 in 2 years.
So the question is, so when I was in college, one of the reasons, many moons ago, one of the reasons why I went into, because freshman year, I was undecided. I didn't know what I wanted to do. But it was sophomore year that I declared, I want to be education. And because I remember having a conversation with the dean of the College of Ed, and he said, you never need a job. You'll never, education, teaching is such a respected profession. You're not going to get rich, but you'll never have an issue trying to find a job. These kind of things. I mean, he really made it, and this was, I don't know, almost 15 years ago, maybe, or somewhere around there, that we had that conversation. And now I'm thinking 15 years later, where the state of education is, and how folks are leaving the classroom in droves, and some folks are literally going on their lunch break and not coming back. What do you think? What do you think needs to change, or how do we boost the morale of our educators, especially those who are still planning to stay in the classroom, still wanting to return next year and things like that? What are your thoughts on that?
Teachers are weary. They're really, really tired. They've been
Mhm.
getting mixed messages, and teachers I know have worked night and day to adjust and juggle with online teaching and then back to the classroom, and
Mm.
wearing a mask, not wearing a mask, and especially the teachers who have children under 5 at home are drained. And then you have a sick kid, and you don't have enough sick days, and you need to write sub plans. So we need to figure out a way to accommodate and allow more flexibility within the system. And this education system is not structured for flexibility.
Mm. Yeah. So we
It's
have
part of
those
the
things. Say what?
it's part of the Great Reset. And if we don't acknowledge it and start making strides towards changing some of the things we have in place, whether it's increasing salaries and providing more supports, the change will be forced upon us.
I've seen some school districts increase teacher salaries, give them like
Yep.
a $4,000 bump. There's a school out in a district that I was working with out in North Carolina that did that, but the challenge that they had was they only gave the teachers a raise. They didn't give anybody else a raise. So you had your support staff upset that they weren't recognized, and so that caused another thing. Um, which we could argue, okay, well, the shows that we're talking about teachers and how to keep our teachers in the classroom. But, I've seen, especially teachers that have STEM backgrounds, that leave the math classroom, that leave science rooms, and go into private sectors and other positions, because they can make easily six figures or way more than what they're making now. And then I see a lot of folks that prefer to stay, because it's not necessarily about the money. It's more of, I like to be around kids. I remember, I worked at the university locally, and I worked in the university for about a couple years in, maybe 1 or 2 years in, and I realized I really miss the kids. I miss being around students. You know, I love kids. I love K-12. That is my niche. Now, I can't be an elementary teacher. That's just not my thing. However, I just like to be around students and interacting with them, learning from them, learning with them. That is what I really enjoy doing. So, it just kind of depends on how much you're willing to really, stick to it, and where your passions are. For me, my opinion on it is to boost morale. It's not just necessarily about the salary and pay. Yes, that is great, and I'm not shooting that down at all. But I think I've talked to over the last couple of years. I've talked to a lot of teachers that say they don't, like, they're feeling sick. They're not feeling, they're having this issue, they're having that issue, and they are afraid to take a day off, because what
Yes.
happens when I take a day off? Well,
You have
they
to
don't
write.
have any subs at my school, you know, or I feel like I'm letting the school down, because if I take a day off and two other or three other teachers take a day off, that's 4 or 5 subs that we got to try to, like, they start thinking from that perspective. And then the mental health, I feel like it gets lost behind all that, and we're not taking care of ourselves. And I dealt with some personal stuff over the last couple of years and still had to show up to school, and that was tough. That
It
was
is
tough. Mhm,
it is tough, and we need to build in all those supports.
mhm.
In
So
the end,
having those mental health supports, I think,
yeah,
that's my thing. That's where I'm at.
we don't have enough counselors in our schools.
Yeah.
We need more counselors.
We need more counselors, and like my friend Chris says, we spend more money on school resource officers and not enough money on our mental health providers. Because it's funny you say we need more counselors, but we got to be specific about that, right? Because counselors could mean more folks that are coming in, working with your scheduling and helping kids get to college, and those, we have that side, but then we need also to make sure that we have professionals that are certified or prepared to help with mental health supports as well, and not just for the students, but also these resources need to be available for our adult staff as well. Let's see. I see a comment here. Karen says, I'm late to the party, but a big part of the stress is teacher autonomy being stripped. Oh, that's a good one.
Yes.
Teacher
Yes.
autonomy being stripped away, teaching to a script has been hard. Thank you for bringing that up. I didn't even think about that. Thank you for bringing that up. Do you have any thoughts on that, Popsy?
I've never done it, but I know teachers who have, and
Mhm.
some of them actually say it's easier. But my concern with something like that is, how do you respond to student needs?
Mhm.
If the student doesn't get it and you have to reteach, and your scripted lesson tells you to move on, where does that leave the student?
Yeah. Yeah, and then that brings on stress, right? And then we have accountability, because we got to make sure our kids pass their tests and all these,
Mhm.
the textbooks. Like, a lot of times we don't even have that option, or
Yeah.
and then nowadays these times, if you try to go off script and bring in your own flair, if you will, yeah, you're afraid that, parents are going to come at you, and whether or not your principal is going to support you as you're doing this work. Don't talk about social justice or any of those type of things in your classroom. Some of these schools uh stick to the script kind of thing. And that's too bad, and that's, I've seen a lot of that happening. See, Karen says teachers aren't trusted to know what's best. Yeah.
You're so right, Karen.
Yeah. Let's see, Beth says, my daughter is changing careers to become a teacher, moving into it from the business world because she wants to get out from behind a desk, and I am trying to prepare her for the challenges she is going to face. Okay. Okay.
Well, I would say I am thrilled for your daughter, because we need good teachers. And she's also fortunate because she's got you, Beth.
Yes.
And so you'll be able to support her as she goes through this process.
She's lucky. She's
Yeah,
lucky to have. Isn't that great when you have a really, parent, somebody that can help you out
exactly.
with
Yes.
that. So that's
Yeah.
good. She's in good hands. She's in good hands. Let's see one more here, and then we'll jump back on. Mona says, yes, Karen. Daniel Pink's research says that the three keys to intrinsic motivation are autonomy, mastery, and purpose. For many, the current climate and conditions challenge all three.
That is so true.
Yes. Good stuff. All right. So let's move into standardized testing. Okay, let's segue into standardized testing. What are your thoughts there?
Ah. Okay. I came into teaching and I was certified as an ESOL teacher because that's what we called it back then. And what I realized very quickly is students who were emergent bilingual learners, after they'd been in the US for a year, were expected to take standardized tests in this school district or in the state.
Mhm.
And I remember one standardized test that had references that I think even people who are younger than I am wouldn't get because it referenced a dance from the 50s or 60s, like the mashed potato,
Yeah.
and it talked about wearing Mary Janes, and this 3rd grade boy from El Salvador looked at me and as I read the question to him, and he was completely befuddled.
Oh
So
man.
and then the next day, the poor kid came back for a math test, and again, it was something like, Johnny went to the library and got books on trains, boats, and cars, and then but there were also books on buildings. What did Johnny not get? And the way the question was phrased in terms of the negative, what did he not do,
Mhm.
just again threw off the kid.
That's too bad. I've seen language on tests that talk about like the hokey pokey.
Yeah,
Um, and I'm like, I barely know what the hokey pokey. I've heard of it, but I don't really know what it is, and we expect our kids to know what the hokey pokey is. But
especially a male student from another country.
from another country, and we think about right now, we got a lot of new Americans coming in, a lot. And these questions were written 20, 30 years ago, and we still use them every day, every year or whatever for this test. And we're not updating these type of the content, and we're not really making sure that they're not culturally biased and all these type of things. And we're thinking about who's writing these questions. And like you said, the different words, couch versus sofa, and how those type of words can impact a student doesn't mean that they're less intelligent. It's just like you said, it throws some of our kids off.
Or the word restaurant. If a kid has been in a refugee camp for 2 or 3 years, they don't know about restaurants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, also, I came into teaching at a time when No Child Left Behind was the mode of the day, and to look at a school and decide if it was a failing school, you divided up kids by groups. So all of the English language learners were a group, but as soon as they were proficient, they got moved into the regular classroom group. And so the newcomers were always part of the ESOL group. And at some point, it's going to take them longer to move into proficiency. And when you look at the groups in that fashion, one year we had a group of students who received free and reduced price meals who were African American, who were boys, and it was the same 3 or 4 students, but they were
Mm.
counted in different cells for the purposes of accountability, but it was the same kids. It was one of those,
Oh.
how does this make sense?
Mhm. But see, here's the thing. However they put that, however they collected that data, they probably weren't watching to see what names were popping up. It was just, well, okay, you hit this. Here's your threshold. I'm boom, boom, boom. Put this in Excel or whatever medium I'm utilizing, and they're not necessarily paying attention to those things. I'm not a fan of penalizing kids for stuff that's out of their control. If I come in, if I'm escaping death or some sort of genocide or whatever I got going on from a former country, my home country, and I'm coming to United States to seek a better way of life. I don't think we should be punishing our kids. On top of that, they've already dealt with a lot of stuff back home, and now they come here and they still got to deal with more stuff. That's not why they came
Exactly.
here.
No.
Yeah, this is good. Popsy, it's always great to chat with you. And if there's something that we haven't touched on that you want to discuss, I would love let's see, I'd love for you to kind of share your final thoughts, and then if there's folks that have some questions, we can entertain those as well.
Okay, that's a good question from Karen, and
Mhm.
so I'll answer that first. Um, one of the things I did, and I was trying not to do heroes and holidays, but when something came up,
Mhm.
such as a holiday, I would go to various sites. The BBC has a very helpful site on different holidays, and I'd
Mhm.
take a few minutes just to discuss it and talk about it. I did not put anybody in the class on the spot, but a couple of times I had kids whose either the child or the parent said, "We'd like to share some information," in which case they were more than welcome to discuss it and share, but I never asked. If they volunteered, that was great.
Mhm.
And, so we talked about things like Chinese New Year or the Jewish holidays or Eid or Ramadan, whatever came up, and it was different each year and different for different people. And then there's also the recognition that different people from different regions and different backgrounds, even if it's the same religion or culture, may celebrate differently. So
Mhm.
that someone might celebrate Eid one way and so a different culture might celebrate it slightly differently, or people from the north or the south. So it made for interesting conversations, but it also made people more comfortable with each other. And one time I had a kid say, "That's not how we do it." And I said, "Well, how do you do it?" And then they shared and said, "Well, this is what we do in my house." And I said, "That's great to know."
Yeah.
So not putting them on the spot. And the most important thing I'd say is centering the students. We have got to center the students. And I am thrilled that Beth's daughter is going to be a teacher because that's what we need.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll add to that as well. When it comes to being culturally responsive with the work, because the question was, how can I help teachers be more responsive to students of color without leaving out white students? And I think one of the things that we also have to consider is the way our educational system is structured. Our students, our white students, our students of color, for example, as well, are used to getting more content that is represented by folks of European descent. So I doubt that you will be able to make your white students feel um, as if they're not leave them feel like they're being left out. And I'll give you an example. I remember one time when I was teaching, I was subbing for my science teacher, and we were reading some science lesson, and it was in a textbook, and it was just one page that had nothing but black kids in the pictures on the lesson. I don't remember what the lesson was, and I remember a white student yelled out, "Well, why are all the kids black on this page?" And I said, "Literally, turn the page." And I said, turn the page again, turn it again, turn it again. It was after that, it wasn't as diverse. And so, but that moment for that student just to seeing, recognize, wait a second, this is not what I'm used to seeing. This is different. This one is not like the others. So I just sometimes just having and I had a conversation, and a teachable moment, I think. But I think just reminding our students, you know what, let's keep it real. Um, Most of the content that you might have been receiving has been kind of one-sided. And so we do want to make sure that we are providing a multicultural perspective. Utilizing that type of language, I think, is important. Saying multiple perspectives, multiple viewpoints, multicultural education, and just reminding students the value in that. Just a lot of times we have a lot of students that are just used to being at the center when it comes to having people that look like them, have being the primary focus, and just reminding them the value in seeing differences.
And I'll go back to my childhood. Growing up in Singapore, we celebrated everything.
Mhm.
So school basically went on almost all year. We had a couple of breaks, about a month in December and about a month in the summer. But we celebrated Chinese New Year, we celebrated Easter, we celebrated Ramadan and Eid, which depends on where the moon is and when it is. We celebrated Vesak Day, we celebrated Deepavali, you name it, we celebrated it, and Christmas. And so as a result, you had friends or neighbors who celebrated something, and you were invited to that celebration. And we got a lot of holidays,
Yep.
which when you're young is a lot of fun.
I love that. Oh yeah, yeah. Mirrors, windows, sliding doors. I forgot about that. Thank you for bringing that up, Beth.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good one there. All right. Well, Popsy, it is always a pleasure. If we have folks that want to connect with you, what is the best way to reach you online?
It's in the chat.
All right, let me drop that in. You want to share it with the folks as well? Or
Sure.
your email? I'm gonna drop it in the public chat as well in case you want to shoot Popsy an email.
Popsy.kanagarotnam@gmail.com. And I'm also on Twitter and Instagram, Popsy Kanagarotnam, I think, at Popsy Kanagarotnam, I guess.
And you'll have to change that to doctor, right? You'll be changing your handle soon, or what are your
Eventually, yeah.
thoughts? Okay, okay. Well, Popsy, it's truly been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today.
This was great. Thank you very much.
My
And
pleasure.
thanks.
All right. That was my good friend Popsy. Always a pleasure to talk to her and just again, if you appreciate the weekend voices, each week we do the newsletter. She is very influential with doing all the research, a lot of the writing behind it. I can't do all these things by myself. Can't run live streams, podcasts, everything else. And so I'm so fortunate to have Popsy on the team. So thank you so much. I'm glad she was able to join us today. Some I guess key takeaways for today's conversation for me. Again, words are I struggle with that. You know, we spend a lot of time focusing on, is that equity? Is that social emotional learning? Is this, that, and that? At the end of the day, I think a lot of that's just used as distractions to uphold and maintain white supremacy, to maintain the status quo. And I think we really need to be willing to engage in more conversations, engage in more thoughts, and be mindful of the words that we are utilizing, even if we don't think that they are a big deal. Doesn't make our students less intelligent because English is not their first language. Doesn't make our students less intelligent because they don't necessarily understand some of the terms that are on these standardized tests or that are on their quizzes and all these things. We have to really consider those type of things. So I think that is very important. By the way, if you have not, where is it at? If you have not, where is it? There it is. You haven't bought the book yet. Leading Equity, Becoming an Advocate for All Students. Make sure you pick that up so we can get you signed up. We already got a couple people that purchased the book during this live stream, and they are signed up for our book study. There's a free book study that's going to be starting in July. I will personally be working with you in a Zoom format. If you can't make all the sessions, it's totally fine. We're going to record them as well, since you'll have access to them. I'm thinking about doing a launch party. I don't know how to do a launch party, but I want to do one. So maybe I'll give a Popsy, and Popsy might help me out with that as well. But that is something I want to do. Again, for your appreciation. I really do appreciate folks. I was talking, I've had a few Zoom calls actually this morning, and just some of the words and kind things that people have been saying regarding the book and the podcast. And it's just, that's the fuel that keeps me going. I enjoy it. My weekends are usually spent, they're podcast weekends every weekend. I work 7 days a week just for you so that I can deliver this content to you to make sure that you have the tools and resources necessary to ensure equity at your school. Remember the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But by all means, keep moving. Let's continue to be a voice in leading equity.